Hello there, and welcome to Trek Prime, episode 49. We're right up on the cusp of 50 here. And what we're talking about today is, for many, many years, the last installment of Star Trek. And I mean, since we're doing all this multi-universe stuff now, I don't even know what you call it. You know, Enterprise is kind of that last cycle. You recently did a video about this. Enterprise is the very thing linking the Star Trek that came from TOS onward to all this multiverse stuff happening now. It's the key thing in all of them.
Yeah.
Enterprise exists in all these timelines. So we're talking about Enterprise today. A very interesting, complex production, a series that I don't know if it's controversial or difficult or just a little broken. It's an odd series to describe because it's Star Trek's first prequel, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you a question, and this is something that I thought of the minute I heard about it. When you first heard that Paramount at the time, in 2001, were doing a Star Trek prequel, what were your first thoughts about just the idea of a prequel itself?
Well, I was kind of disappointed in a way because I figured that there'd be more of a series after, Nemesis or something, like the show would pick up afterwards.
The same idea, It just seemed like Gene Roddenberry always talked about we're boldly going where no one has gone before, and this is more like not so boldly going backward,
Yeah, I wasn't sure what stories they really could talk about, before Kirk and Spock, because I figured, that before that it was pretty chaotic before the TOS, and that there was a lot of, because we meet all these colonies and we hear a little bit about the past, and it's always seemed like they were still piecing things together before, the Federation. So it's like, how much could they really talk about that except just, how they put the government together.
And you know how the secret Paramount even was about production. I was kind of thinking, well, if it's going to be a prequel, why don't we talk about the first Federation starship?
Yeah.
Like after the Federation formed.
Yeah.
At least we'd have a Federation, just kind of the first ones going out there. Then they said we're going to set it before the forming of the Federation. And I thought, again, like you said, I just heard about colonies and stuff, but no real starships.
Yeah.
But they're saying this is going to be the first ship to go out there. And then they showed that picture of that top picture of the NX-01 starship. And I thought it was an Akira class, basically.
Yeah.
But at the top view, you don't see, because it's just a nacelle stick up, but it looks like the Akira. Like, this is weird. It seemed weird to me, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So then I saw Scott Bakula, because they had those TV guys, remember?
Yep.
And I knew who he was. They had, Jolene Blaylock as DePaul, Tangle Up in Tree Bark.
Yeah.
Of course, because she was on the TV guide in that outfit that looked like
hideous
a pine tree, And then they had everybody, and I said, okay, I can kind of see this. They had those blue kind of suits, were kind of NASA-like.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember they said something interesting about Enterprise. They said, we don't want you to think of these people as Starfleet officers. They're astronauts on a specialized mission. And they looked like astronauts, didn't they? They had the space helmets and the suits a lot, and they seemed more like astronauts. I mean, is that the vibe you got when you first started seeing them?
Yeah, I could see the mirror between modern astronauts and what they were trying to do there. The thing of it is they were trying to say, don't think of it as Star Trek as you knew it.
I know.
There was still Starfleet, and there's so it's like, well, we're not really starting at the beginning because there's already a Starfleet in place. We wanted to go before that to see how it got into place. I think that's the story they wanted to tell.
How did Star Trek happen, basically?
Yeah.
Which is why I guess they took Star Trek off the name at first.
Yeah.
But you know what they say about that? They're not gonna hold me down.
No, I know. Jeez.
We have to discuss that theme song. Not very long, but we have to discuss it. That's actually, I would say, that's a secondary. And actually now I can do that. That's a secondary moment where this comes in handy. Because whenever that comes on, I just always skip through it if I watch it on Netflix. I just want to get to the show.
Zap that one right out.
I remember when I was watching that pilot, when and it was September 26, 2001. So we were just on the cusp of 9/11.
Yeah.
And I'm going to discuss that in a little bit. But I remember I didn't have cable at the time, so it was being simulcast on UPN, which we were getting through UHF at that time.
Yeah.
So in those days, I had to fiddle with the antenna still on the TV to get good reception. So I'm up there with snacks or whatever, and the first thing you hear is, "It's been a long road," and I thought, okay, this is like an ad.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, this is the theme song? And the funny thing about it is, I actually like the visuals of that a lot.
Yeah.
It was showing the ships and showing NASA and then the Phoenix, and then they show that little shuttle or whatever going over the moon, and then you see NX-01 going to warp.
Yeah.
But the song is like, why did they use it? It just seems so silly to me. It's like, what is the series going to be? Is this going to be like Dawson's Creek in space or something?
Yeah.
Is this going to be a teen drama? I mean, what's this going to be? And then you see a very TNG era looking Klingon running through a field. Like, what? Isn't this supposed to be? Oh. So I'm all confused. And then these aliens were slithering under doors, and I thought, this is very confusing. I didn't realize there was all this time travel and the Suliban. I thought was all very confusing at first.
Yeah.
I knew about it, but it was kind of like, what am I watching exactly? Then you saw the NX-01, was like, okay, now I get it. The crew's getting together. They're introducing phase pistols. Okay, that's kind of cool. But it was kind of hard for me to kind of put this in with what I thought that time period would be.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed there were things that were just a little bit, not terribly off, but just enough off where it was just peculiar.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my experience.
I mean, yeah, they were doing things in the series that's like, well, how come, when TOS, Kurt, and none of these people knew anything about all this stuff, nobody ever mentioned the Suliban or anything like that in the whole running of the show.
I mean, even though the Klingon looked a little weird for that time period, at least it was the Klingon, so I figured, okay, yeah. Klingons. And you mentioned this before, that they got the Klingon first contact a little off from what you knew.
Yeah.
As far as you knew, they encountered the Klingons in space and things didn't go well.
That's right.
Here, a Klingon crashed on Earth, escaping, from what I understand, these Suliban.
Yeah.
And it was not a Klingon from that time. It was a TNG era Klingon.
I mean, it seemed like they were in this habit of the Borg crashed on Earth. The Vulcans landed on Earth. The Klingons crashed on. It's like everything came to Earth.
Yeah, it was sort of like Deep Space Nine, only reversed. Rather than being somebody to the space station, everything just.
It was never us encountering them. It was always them accidentally encountering us.
So I just thought, okay, so they got to return this guy to his homeworld, and that somehow screwed things up. And I thought, it's just the pilot was a little weird. I mean, because they were trying to do all these different things, and they were trying to introduce the crew. They were trying to get this Klingon back, and then there was a Suliban thing somehow tied into it.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, I had a lot of trouble following it. And Broken Bow was every one of my favorite premieres, just because it's hard to follow. I mean, because there's all these sketchy storylines they're kind of putting together.
Yeah.
It's not like Farpoint where you've got the crew coming together and they got this Farpoint mission in queue. It's like there's all these little tributaries you got to deal with.
Yeah. And
it just, the focus wasn't there with me with that. Now, that's my experience, of course. When you first saw Enterprise, what was going through your head when you were first dealing with this beginning?
Well, when it started, and the narrative there was about the Vulcans having held humans back.
Oh, yes.
And I did not like that part. I totally disliked that.
And wasn't that like the start of it? Because you saw young Archer building that ship.
Yeah.
And he's making anti-Vulcan slurs because he said that, we were told that we would have been at Warp 5 by now if Vulcans hadn't kept things from us.
Yeah, and I hated the idea, that they were just, bad-mouthing the Vulcans every 5 minutes, and it's like, then they have a Vulcan on the ship, which they, that kind of went against the idea that Spock was the first Vulcan to serve in Starfleet. It's like, well, wait a minute, now there's T'Pol.
And she's not even Starfleet, she's a Vulcan observer.
Yeah, but he wasn't actually the first. I mean, there was another Vulcan that served with humans on a human ship, and it's like, well,
right. And you made another point about that. Why would Vulcans per se be involved with human warp development at all?
Yeah, I mean, aren't we supposed to be less evolved than they are? I mean, if they have a prime directive, then why were they involved in trying to get us up to par with space warp and all that stuff? I mean, that's doesn't make any sense. Kind of flies in the face of that philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, why would Vulcans be spoon feeding warp technology to Earth anyway?
Yeah, I mean, they saw the devastation that happened to Earth. It was just right at the end of the Third World War. So they figure, well, these people are ready now for an alien to come down and present themselves. And, it's like, well, hey, that's the worst friggin' time. You want to do that,
So, yeah, that was just, that was all a little bit weird.
Because you saw how that played out in the mirror universe part of it when they get
Yeah, everyone coming to the gun on, like, oh, you can, whatever. It seems so weird just to see that play out like that.
Yeah, but it could easily have gone that way. I mean,
It's a wonder that didn't actually happen in the Prime universe.
Yeah, because the humans were like savages after World War III. I mean, who knows? They'd have been scared, or they'd have thought it was the enemy or something. Who knows? They'd have probably thought that.
You got to wonder. Even this is kind of a fanon thing, if you want to call it that way. You got to wonder if there weren't some kind of anti-Vulcan police brutality or murders after that for that same reason.
Maybe, yeah.
Which would have been interesting to kind of go back and look at that, because that might have also motivated Vulcans' distrust of humans, which we didn't know existed.
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden in Enterprise, these Vulcans are so mistrustful. What did the humans ever do to them to make them mistrustful?
That's right.
Must have been something pretty bad. We just never really got to it. And another reason we didn't get to that is because they were trying to work this thing in with Suliban and this mystery man. Remember him?
Yeah.
That mystery man from the future and this time travel.
The Shadow.
Yeah, did they really get into what that was all about?
Only the Shadow knows. Yeah, they never really answered who this person was.
They kind of went into some other thing after that. They didn't really cover who that Shadow guy was.
Yeah.
So, that it's like we're just supposed to make guesses on that.
Yeah.
Like the Suliban Phantom.
The Phantom. The Phantom Menace.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's no loss on me that they were just finishing up the Star Wars prequels when they started Enterprise.
Yeah.
When they stopped Enterprise, because that was, they had been a Phantom Menace a few years before Enterprise premiere, and they were kind of going along with the Star Wars prequels, which ended in 2005, like Enterprise did.
Yeah.
And that was one of the sad things about Enterprise, that all the other shows after TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, all that 7 years, Scott Bakula was saying he was hoping they beat the record. They only lasted 4.
Yeah.
And it's that was only a season longer than TOS. And, I think a lot of people look at Enterprise as being the death knell of Star Trek, because not that it was particularly bad, but just the idea that people thought it was kind of overload, I think. Maybe they felt it was overload. They were going right from Voyager to that,
Yeah, they rushed it into production. I think it was just too fast. They didn't really give it much thought. I mean,
they didn't have the momentum.
Yeah.
Because with Deep Space Nine, with Voyager, they had the momentum of Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and they just kind of rolled right along.
Yeah.
DS9 was over by then. Voyager just ended, and then they just kind of sat there, and they had to rebuild it from the ground up. And it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
So now I wasn't on the internet really much during Enterprise. A little bit toward the end of it.
Yeah.
Because I was involved in around season 3, season 4. I was involved when I was using a computer down at the library. Shows you how long ago that was. I didn't even have my own. I was doing it at library, and I actually did an online. But back before they had time limits on it, I did an interview with John Billingsley from that show. It was a online. Remember StarTrek.com?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They'd have all these like online interviews, and I asked him some questions. He was very pleasant with me, so I actually interacted online a little bit with the Enterprise crew.
Okay.
That was kind of fun, and ironically, it was when the show was starting to get interesting, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that was my first really interaction with this kind of internet world of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Now that's my first. Now, what was your, aside from the Vulcan thing and just seeing it, were there any significant events when you were watching Enterprise that leaped out at you in any particular way? I mean, any events that paralleled your life in Enterprise, you getting involved in any way?
From the internet, you mean, or
in any way? Just what was there any? Were you writing into magazines or anything around that period about that era?
I think I did, but that was during Voyager. I don't know if I did during Enterprise. I think I wrote something there. I can't even remember now. It's been so long. It's over 20 years ago. But I think at the time, when I was online, I didn't see too many positive feedback from people watching Enterprise. I saw a lot of negatives and a lot of people wishing the show would end because they didn't like where it was going. And for the first time, and it's kind of daunting because, you think about when the letter writing campaign went for TOS to keep the show on the air. Well, this time it was people writing to take the show off the air.
Yeah, that was kind of horrifying in a way. It's like, Star Trek, they had the letter writing campaign during season 1, 2, whatever, to keep the show on the air. And now they were telling people, please take this turkey off.
Yeah. People were really offended.
In its first and second year, wasn't it just pretty much, just clogging up the UPN lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think after season 2, I mean, they decided to change the focus of the show, and they did that whole season 3 where it's just like
and that's the Suliban all of a sudden gone away. Now we got Xindi and Sphere Builders.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then again, does that sound kind of familiar to you, changing focus of a series right midway through?
Well, I mean, they kind of connected it with season 2 with the Cold War thing going on, but the Suliban weren't really the focus, as the villain anymore. Now it was like, there's all kinds of other villains involved with this Cold War now, and it's not just the Suliban. Now we have these mysterious sphere builders that are also manipulating time, and it just felt like, well, it's still time travel-y based, and they did make some little side stories along the way dealing with the main story, but it felt like, they had the audience on pins and needles for the whole season.
If I had done Enterprise, I would have done a straight-up prequel and dealt with things specifically of the 22nd century. Like, maybe at season 3 be the Romulan War season.
Yeah.
Have it kind of deal with that rather than... It almost made it seem like, well, Enterprise is a weird thing, but the reason you don't hear about it is because there's all this time travel and they make it all confidential.
If they wanted to make it all action-y, it's like you said, why didn't they just start it with the Romulan War? They could have had plenty of action here.
That could have been the season 2, 3 cliffhanger right there, just, and then have maybe the next year or so be the Romulan War season.
Yeah.
And then, they could still do all that stuff they did later, but they wouldn't have introduced all these aliens we got to deal with in the future.
Yeah, they had to create a whole new race of people that we never seen before.
TOS, TNG, never heard a thing about a Xindi, never heard anything about the, the Suliban.
Yeah.
And, instead of the Xindi, why didn't we have it be like the Harada, or at least the race we knew of?
Yeah, I mean, if they were going to be such a pivotal role in the existence of the Federation, I mean, there should have been Xindi all around all the time, right?
Right, or they should have had the Kzinti attached to us, because in the animated series, Spock said there have been several wars with the Kzinti they all lost.
Yeah, but he said Kzinti, so it was like, they always have this playoff of the same,
Yeah, Kzinti, Xindi.
It's like the Terrellians, everything, they keep making names.
Yeah, kind of copy-pasta variations.
Yeah. I mean,
it would have been interesting if they'd had, instead of the Xindi, have them be the Kzinti, because it made more sense. We knew they were at war with the Federation at one point. But they tried to do something on Earth, and they screwed up, and everybody had to fix it. They should have kept it like a TOS prequel.
Yeah.
And just so we could lead up. And the Star Wars movies did that. They didn't bring all these crazy new things into it. Well, except Jar Jar Binks, but they didn't put crazy stuff into it. But I'm just saying that, the one thing about Enterprise I think screwed it up is I tended to like the standalone episodes a lot better. Because the one they tried to put a myth arc into it about time travel, and that just muddied the waters. It didn't really give it a chance to open up and develop in any good, reasonable kind of way.
Yeah.
It just made it into a bit of a circus to have to deal with.
Yeah.
So, and then because they do a couple like just regular episodes, and they do a myth arc one, and then the season ends would be a myth arc thing, and it's
yeah,
it just it got murky really to me.
Yeah.
So okay, and this
it's not a wonder when Archer came back to Earth after all the hell he went through for that year that he was so cynical and despondent, and well, we need to arm our ships to the teeth, because I mean, I think I would have been the same way. I mean, his ship almost got chewed to pieces here, and
well, of course, there was an event that happened before that, because the ship had been involved in an incident where they went back to World War II, where the Nazis had somehow won due to Xindi technology.
I mean, it felt like, we were doing Lost in Space here. I mean, we can't get home. We're always we're in the past, we're in the future, or yeah,
it was just like they didn't really know where to take it in regard to, any kind of coherent story.
Yeah.
And okay, so I guess we should probably move on from that to the characters, which was also sketchy because a lot of them were not 100% developed.
Yeah.
They didn't get the chance to be developed. Obviously, Jonathan Archer, we knew him from Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap, so that was a connection. And basically, I guess I describe him as kind of being the first guy. A lot of times he gave the impression that he was very earnest, but he was really inventing the wheel. You didn't get the impression the guy, like, I know my stuff, I've got all this training. He was winging it a lot of times. He kept changing the greeting to other people. In the beginning, he told everybody they came from planet Earth. By the third season, he wasn't doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So his whole command style kept changing and changing because he was the guy inventing the wheel.
Yeah.
There hadn't been a guy doing what he did before. That's what I'm gathering. There wasn't a person out there, anybody, guy, anybody, girl exploring, and he was rewriting. He wasn't a guy getting up there saying, I know what I'm doing, like Kirk or Picard or Pike, any of them.
Yeah.
Janeway, Cisco. He was just like, okay, well, here's what we're doing. We're going to figure this out. It was a lot of guesswork. And I think you'd think a series like that would have really been better at character development. But instead, they just kind of sat on some characters. A good example of this is Weapons Officer Malcolm Reed.
Yeah.
I don't know but then we went through a period, I think maybe season 1 and 2, where we had no really idea who this man was.
Yeah.
There was a whole episode where one of the main stories was they couldn't even figure out what he wanted for his birthday.
Yeah, I mean, they really kind of highlighted the fact that this guy, we're never going to really know him because he keeps his mouth shut.
Yeah, and usually we don't have a lot of wallflowers on starships.
Yeah.
Usually everybody's kind of known to somebody in some capacity.
Yeah.
It's hard to be on a ship together on a mission exploring space without knowing who you're exploring with. But he was this guy who was there. And then, of course, in season 4, I think they tried to kind of put in a solution, which I didn't like because I thought it was more of a Deep Space Nine thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Starts with an S, ends with a 31. So, oh, really? That's what it had to be? He had to be spy junk? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, the only way they could make him interesting was to, connect him to that. It's like...
Yeah, it's like, well, that wasn't really Enterprise's thing anyway. I don't know why there. So, yeah, and that was a character that just kind of got sat on.
Yeah.
And they were trying to pair him up with Travis Mayweather, who had a history. He had been a space boomer. He was born on one of those freighters. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
So they kind of had a character with him, but they didn't. Again, it was kind of like, man, we'll try to buddy him up with Reed, but this kind of fizzled out. They had that. What was that one where they were in the shuttle together? Shuttle Pod 1.
Oh yeah, when they thought the Enterprise was destroyed and they were stuck in space in the shuttle.
Right, and they were kind of getting a little drunk together, but again, it's just like that was it. I mean, they really didn't establish much after that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that was probably the only episode where you got to kind of know Reed a little bit, because when he got himself drunk, he was kind of talking a lot and saying things and how pessimistic he was. Remember, he was kept writing saying all these letters, and Tucker was getting sick of hearing him, making.
Right, he was kind of sending all these kind of dreary letters and.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that Hoshi, she's an interesting one because they kept changing her character around. In the first season, she was kind of awkward and space sick, kind of a little like Ezri Dax.
Yeah, she's a little bit nervous,
Right. Then in the second year, all of a sudden, she's basically O'Brien because it's like Hoshi must suffer. She gets messed up with the transporter and all these terrible things happen. Yeah. And all of a sudden in season 3 and 4, she has this past being compulsive gambler.
Yeah.
So I'm like, who is this woman? There's no real establishment who this character is. One minute she's basically a nervous wreck. The next second she just has to suffer for some reason. The next second she has a kind of sleazy past.
Yeah.
So like, who is this woman? Is she like somebody with multiple identities or something? What's the story here? It's like they're changing Hoshi Aaron every year. And then of course there's one of the important main characters, DePaul. Now, we had a chance to explore 22nd century Vulcans here. And instead, we kind of got this Vulcan who really, for a Vulcan, this is odd, had a lot of emotional upsets.
Yeah.
And, I mean, even in the first episode, she's barely hiding volatility toward humans. But that goes for a lot of Vulcans in this show. I remember Ambassador Saval was raising his voice at Archer in the pilot, and he said, "Oh, aren't you getting a little emotional suddenly?"
Yeah.
Like, when are these Vulcans getting so uptight? And then they bring in that whole thing about Pajam and spying on the Andorians, and it just isn't very Vulcan or that logical behavior.
Yeah.
It's more paranoid.
They're acting more like Romulans, you know.
Right, and then of course you find out it's a sect in the Vulcans, but still, it's like, I don't know.
Through the whole series, they kept saying, "Oh, well, to Paul, your emotions have always been on the surface." And I'm thinking, well, every Vulcan we've met on Enterprise has been their emotions have been on the surface. I mean, she ain't the only one.
Yeah, exactly. It really it doesn't make sense. And not only that, when she's on the ship, you know, and maybe this is just because, you know, maybe it's just Jolene Blaylock's acting ability, you know, that she's pulling this off so well. T'Pol always acts like she's hiding some huge, big secret.
Yeah.
In the early season, like, whenever somebody asks a question, she never really gives much of a real answer.
Yeah, like she's holding back, yeah.
Right. I mean, now Spock was serious and Tuvok was serious, but if you ask them a question, they gave you a pretty straight answer.
That's right.
A logical one, but a very straight answer. She always acted like kind of shifty. There was one episode.
It's like she's like, I'm not going to tell them this because that's going to alter, you know, like she's always trying to protect them, you know, by holding back information until they pry it out of her. And then it's like, well, don't you think that was something we should have known before we got here? You know, and it's like, you know?
Yeah, they always kind of made her be kind of like she was a spy or something.
Yeah.
And I thought they were actually taking it that way. Oh, DePaul's a spy, and you know, it was weird to see Vulcans being so suspicious and shifty.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you get the impression she didn't trust humans with things.
That's right.
And I mean, I'm used to seeing Vulcans just being there and being integrated, and you know, looking down their nose maybe a bit of humans, but really just doing what they're doing, just, you know, being helpful people. And I mean, yeah, she did her part on the ship, but when she interacted with the crew in any way, it always seemed a little bit like she half trusted them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, although for her part, she did give her decent advice to Trip in the pilot about that child who he was going to unintentionally kill. Remember the one who couldn't breathe the air?
Yeah.
And he thought the woman was trying to choke the kid.
Yep.
Like, no, that's a ventilation system. They can't breathe this air. So that was good. That was a good way to take T'Pol, but of course that's kind of went to another place because they started shipping those two.
Well, they should have had more moments like that in the series where the crew misinterprets things because it's the first time they get to see all these different alien races.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because when I read the early literature on it, they said, this is a show we're going to see people interfering with other societies. And I'm like, why aren't we seeing more of that?
Yeah.
You know, for the most part, they're just encountering time travelers or going to some random planet where they end up going into jail for no reason.
Yeah.
You know, I don't see them going to planets and saying, well, let's give them all this stuff and let's give them all that and just we'll leave, you know. We should have seen more of that. And then learning lessons from that.
Yeah.
Well, there was one, but I'm going to mention it because I'm doing an episode thing. But anyway.
Well, they did have that one that was pretty bad where Tucker meets this, what do they call her, progenitor or something like that? It was a race of 3 sexes. And in the progenitor, I guess that's what they called her, he was trying to say, well, she has rights, and he was trying to teach her how to read and all this stuff, and she got, you know, learn all that stuff, and then come to find out, you know, she wasn't supposed to know all this stuff, and she wanted to leave the ship, you know.
Right, that's a good example of that.
And, you know, that was like a good, you know, at the end, you get this impression, you know, and the captain's like telling them, you know, how many times are going to have to tell you, you know, to stop interfering and stuff. And he said that the progenitor killed herself because they, you know, she didn't want to stay. She wanted to, you know, be her own person. And he said you interfered with it, you know, and I thought that was another good story that they could have kind of repeated along the way.
Yeah, there really should have been more. Instead, what you ended up hearing is Captain Archer lecturing about how they needed a prime directive all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like, remember, this is Star Trek. They were just kind of trying to hint it that way.
That's why we didn't really need to have the T'Pol character. I think there should have been just a ship with with humans, because that way there wouldn't have been somebody nagging all the time saying, "Don't do this, don't do that." You know, they had to learn this stuff on their own.
Yeah,
and
the Paul became kind of like a stage mother in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Kind of reminding them of things rather than staying on Earth and saying, "You've got to go your own way with this."
Yeah.
You know. If I remember, didn't the Vulcans assign her there?
Yeah, they did. You know, which kind of cheated the whole idea about humans learning their place in the universe and stuff. You know, and how they're supposed to be out there and be responsible.
Yeah, this whole thing with Vulcans is going to come up over and over again. I'm guessing because that's just the
because they totally mishandled that whole segment of Enterprise. Is that, I mean, a lot of people, we're not the only ones. A lot of people wrote to them about that, saying that this is not Vulcans, this is not what they do. You guys are contradicting this, contradicting that. You know, it was that was one of the reasons why they wanted the show to end, because it was stepping all over canon of what we know of Vulcans.
And again, doesn't that sound a little familiar?
Yeah. I'm beginning to wonder how many people that was working on Enterprise is working on the other show now.
Well, we can call it Discovery. It's not what we're talking about, but we can call it that. I mean, current Star Trek. You know, it always comes back to that. We're trying to be Trek Prime, but we have to deal with how these things led to what we're happening now.
Yeah.
You know, that like we're trying to make Star Trek that doesn't work for Star Trek anymore. But, you know, I think with Enterprise, I've tended to feel that with all of its problems and all of its issues, like you said in that video, when you look at TOS through Nemesis, or the K2 Nemesis, if you want to look at it even more further, or you look at the Kelvin timeline, you look at whatever Discovery is, I don't know what even that is. That's over there somewhere. Enterprise exists in all of them in its current form.
Yeah.
It's almost like that's the center of the Star Trek universe, and everything springs off from that somehow.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's the road to every Star Trek alternate timeline there is.
Yeah.
Enterprise is the one that they all have in common.
Yeah.
Same in all of them. So.
Yeah.
Presumably, because we saw an NX-01 on the desk of.
If we take what we know from Star Trek, what we've learned about things in Star Trek, and apply it to how we can explain all this stuff, I mean, that would be the way to explain it, is that you have alternate timelines that all spring from Enterprise, you know.
Maybe that's why we don't hear a lot about NX-01, because they may have made some of that confidential. I'm wondering if maybe NX-01 is an era that actually intersects a number of different timelines and is involved in a Cold War. And
yeah, I'm just thinking maybe that's what it is. The Cold War probably did something, created these splinters, timelines or something, you know, I don't know.
And maybe that's why, you know, we didn't hear about Enterprise during Kirk's era.
Yeah.
Maybe it was confidential or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think it was a historic starship, but.
Yeah. You
know, again, all that time travel just confused the whole issue.
It did. It did. It really did.
But, you know, not to get into this whole thing about why Enterprise stank, you know, which we could easily do. I wanted to kind of do a little thing about favorite episodes and why they were favorites. I don't know if you have any in mind of your own, but I made kind of a list of ones that I remember that I thought were kind of interesting. So I don't know if you wanted to go over a list you made, or if you wanted me to just talk about the ones I made or whatever.
Well, I think, I'm trying to think now. I think one of the episodes that I liked was when they went on that planet, one of the first ones, and they remember I guess it was the pollen or something about the wind blowing up all the stuff on the grasses, making them kind of paranoid.
Was that the Strange New World episode?
Yeah, it was in the first season, and T'Pol and everybody was getting all paranoid, and they were starting to suspect each other, and it was all because of the wind blowing all the stuff in the air, and they were breathing it, and they didn't know until, you know, Dr. Phlox figured out what it was. And I was like, remember they tried to beam somebody up, and when they showed up in the transport, they had all the stuff stuck inside their body because of the wind
stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like that one, because that, like you said, that sort of was like an episode that showed humans, you know, kind of stumbling and tripping their way out into the galaxy for the first time, and encountering things they on the surface they just take for granted as, oh, this is a nice place, you know, and they don't realize there could be hidden dangers there that they don't know about, you know. So I like that one.
Yeah, I just, because I think, and to be honest with you, and of course, second episodes of shows are a little bit awkward sometimes. The second episode, they were on the ship just walking around looking for somebody, but I really think that Strange New World should have been like the third episode they did. The second episode they did. Like, okay, they go out on this mission and they land on a planet the second time. It's always good to kind of have a mission happen on the second episode.
Yeah.
Rather than just be some random... But I know, for the pilot, you always want to do that slow story and then go to the better ones after. But, yeah, that was a good one. Any other ones you could think of?
Well, I kind of like... I mean, I know the time travel thing was getting sickening, but I like the idea that they ended up in Earth in an alternate past where Nazi Germany had taken over the United States.
Yeah, that was a bit of an interesting idea because it did present an interesting what-if scenario.
Yeah. And, they based the TV series off of that on Amazon, their original series on Amazon. It's called The Man in the High Castle. And it was based on a story that was written with the same title. And it seemed like an idea that maybe Enterprise might have borrowed from that because, was it the guy that wrote Blade Runner? It was called When Do Androids Dream of electric sheep or something like that.
Right. Was it alternate history where the Nazis took over the States?
Yes, it was that. And then at the same time, in the story, those Nazis find out that there's another Earth, and now they want to conquer the multiverse of Earths and stuff in the story. And they made a TV show on that on Amazon you can watch. And I did a review of it on my own here today, and I put it up. They had 3 seasons of it. They said there's going to be a 4th, but I don't know. I watched the 3 seasons of it. But yeah, I mean, I saw it on Enterprise when they did that, and I thought that was a pretty neat idea. That you get to see how things could have played out if you had aliens coming down and interfering.
Yeah, it reminds me of an idea we've been toying around with about ideas that have their origination in Star Trek, and somebody else rolled with it and did a movie with a similar subject matter.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen a lot, and nobody wants to credit Star Trek with it. They're like, "Oh, it's all our original idea," but
yeah,
I think that's kind of an interesting thing that came out of that, and that was interesting. Although I didn't expect Enterprise to be sent back there, but it was.
Yeah.
And apparently, that was the key to the timeline resetting itself, anyway.
Yeah.
Although I would have preferred to have that like at the end of season 1.
That was sort of like the last time we were going to see Daniels, wasn't it?
Right.
I mean,
because that was kind of over.
Yeah.
I would have had that at the end of season 1, though, or something. Just have the timeline reset at the end of that, and just kind of let that go.
Yeah.
But they kept that going and going all through the Xindi season, all through the,
Yeah.
It just seemed like a little bit of a chore to have that around. Any other things you can think about?
Well, there was some in season 4. I mean, I think season 4 was probably their best season.
Yep, there's a lot in there I can mention too, but so.
But there was one where they showed. Remember the Nausicaans were harassing this crew of cargo haulers, and they were trying to deal with this thing their own way, and then Enterprise shows up to help out, and you find out that the cargo crew had taken a Nausicaan hostage, and that's kind of like where we get to learn a little bit more, about Mayweather.
Was that the Fortunate episode? Fortunate Son?
That was Fortunate, yeah. I think that was the
Son,
one.
yeah.
And you get to see a freighter for the first time, really, in Star Trek. You don't really get to see that much in the other shows, but
right. And they kind of established that the earliest warp ships that were going out there were freighters just taking stuff to colonies.
That's right. So they had this thing where they showed that these are generational ships because they go so slow that people get born. Babies are born on these long trips, and they spend half their life on the ship. They probably and the job is inherited to their children. So you
it just gives you the idea that 22nd century Earth spacefaring history was monumentally different before NX-01.
That's right.
The people were kind of confined to one small area.
That's right.
Because, it kind of implies, I'm going to get a little bit ego moss here. It implies that some of these ships kind of like that. You know, they couldn't really go that fast.
Yeah.
And that they were not suited for long-term exploration. Although, I mean, they may have made runs to like Vulcan or whatever, but NX-1 was kind of the first, so.
Yeah.
That was a good one. I have some, but I wanted to make sure there were anything that you wanted to mention first.
Oh, no, go ahead and do.
Because I end up having a lot of them. And of course, one of my favorites are character building stories. And something I discuss a lot with you, what I call Federation building, like when they're kind of building towards Star Trek world.
Yeah.
One of my favorites, just on the fact it was such an interesting idea, was unexpected. I don't know if you remember that one. It's a trip story. We get to see the first holodeck in that one.
Yeah.
And we also get to see Star Trek's first pregnant male character. Because he literally puts his hand in the wrong place. And then Dr. Phlox, oh, by the way, one of my favorite characters on Enterprise was Phlox. I think that they didn't use an alien we never heard of, a Denobolian, and they tried to give him characteristics, but they didn't really expand a lot on him until a little later, but
yeah,
he was an interesting kind of character. But anyway, he had the unpleasant thing about telling Trip, yeah, you're pregnant with some alien thing, so, you know, it was an interesting kind of character setup to get you used to Trip as a character.
Yeah.
And what kind of things he dealt with. And, you know, another one, I'm not going to get too deep into it because we already did, it was Terra Nova. We talked about that in the Colony one.
Yep.
Where they talk about a failed colony they had to rescue the ancestors of.
Yeah.
And that was just interesting because it kind of pointed out humans' attempts to colonize in previous decades.
Yeah.
And how that worked out.
Or did, as the story showed.
What?
As it didn't work out in that case, you know.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Where's my list here? Here we go. Yes, the next one was Dear Doctor, and that kind of goes a little bit with the Prime Directive era story interfering. There was a culture where there were two humanoid species on a planet.
Yeah.
One was a species that was kind of evolving and growing. The other was not, but they weren't going extinct.
Yeah.
And what happened is that they have to make the decision on whether to... And one of the species is actually dying out.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's the new species. So basically, the only way they figured out for the species to survive is for the older one to not be around anymore.
Yeah.
And they make that choice. And it kind of shows you what Prime Directive Starfleet were doing, what they ended up having to deal with.
Yeah.
Plus the fact it gave the idea of new character development of Phlox, you know, bringing him, because it dealt with the Denobolian cultural exchange and the idea they're a polyamorous species, and just, you know, it kind of gave a little more form to them.
Yeah.
And the next episode that I found interesting was actually sort of a flashback, if you want to look at it a certain way. And that was Carbon Creek.
Yep.
And the reason that I like that episode was because it dealt with Vulcans coming to a rural town on Earth in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And apparently one of the Paul's ancestors invented Velcro, which is it's kind of interesting. And there was a Vulcan who stayed on Earth. Now that I found very interesting.
Yeah.
Did that Vulcan who stayed on Earth marry into the culture, or assimilate? I mean, is that why Vulcans were coming back to Earth in the first place, to try to find that wayward Vulcan that stayed on Earth?
I wondered at the end of the episode, it's like, well, why would she keep that from, you know, the humans? You know, because remember how they ended it sort of like, well, was that a true story, or was it just, you know? Or,
and then she goes in there and finds that purse she had.
Yeah. So she kind of leaves them wondering if that was all true. But I'm like, well, why would they want to pretend it didn't happen? I mean, it's like, well, so what? They came to Earth when, you know, everybody didn't think that they were there. And, you know, what's so secretive about that? I mean, I don't understand why she just said, yeah, this is true, this actually happened, and show them the purse and all that and stuff, you know. But instead she leaves them with a mystery, to figure whether or not she actually told them a real story.
I know. Again, it kind of points to secretive Vulcans.
Yeah.
But in the end, we clear it did happen. But I'm wondering, what became of that Vulcan who decided to stay behind? Is that why they came back to see that from Cochrane to see if he was still there? If he survived the war?
Maybe, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could kind of connect the two stories.
I mean, I would love to have seen that dealt with a little more, because we had the Borg, the first contact Borg that crashed in the Arctic. They became a thing.
Yeah.
And that wasn't supposed to happen at all, but, Same goes with the Ferengi. That was just a little weird, but...
Yeah, it was always weird how they managed to survive coming through the Earth's atmosphere and not burn up, the Borg. They just kind of landed in all in one piece, and they weren't singed or anything like that. It's like, okay.
So, yeah, anyway, we also have another one that I'd forgotten about. I was reading about it tonight that I liked, was an episode called Dead Stop. The ship needed repairs. So it found this really advanced starbase.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
And it turned out the starbase was kind of like a vampire starbase where it fed on the crew for...
That episode felt like a TOS episode, because that's like one of those bizarre things that they encounter in space, and
that felt more like a Star Trek-y thing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because they don't really answer anything about where this thing came from, and then it ends with the thing repairing itself, and it's like, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah, it's got that old TOS-y feel, but that was actually not a bad place for Enterprise to go more exploring and building and things like that. And that TOS style. And that's something I wanted to bring up. Before 9/11, they wanted to make Enterprise much more TOS-like.
Yeah.
In short, being more lighthearted, more focused on missions. But after 9/11, they decided to work in very quickly the Suliban thing.
Yeah.
And that was apparently a last-minute thing.
Yeah.
So the impression I get is they were working on Enterprise right pretty much up to the minute.
That's right.
So I would love to have seen... I wonder if that Dead Stop was a part of that earlier lighthearted TOS-y Enterprise.
Maybe that was one of the stories they were going to make originally, with the premise changed a little bit from what they had started with,
Right. I mean, maybe if TOS Enterprise had been a lighter TOS sort of show, maybe people would have been attached to it more.
I think everybody, since TOS has been kind of looking for a Star Trek series that kind of feels the same as that, and even Next Generation doesn't feel like TOS in any way. It has its own kind of characteristics.
Yeah, that's true. Whenever they brought back a Star Trek, it was kind of like when they did the JJ movies, or the Kelvin time, they kind of wanted to set that in the TOS era. And when they did Discovery, it's sort of in the TOS era, sort of. But they're still kind of slinging around that era. But to me, I don't think the Next Generation's a bad place to be, really.
No.
I mean, it's when you try to go court weird things, it just doesn't always work. But
yeah.
Another one I like, and this is another offshoot story, and another kind of unintentional human colony story, is North Star.
Yeah.
On the cowboy planet with the Skags.
Yeah.
These aliens who kidnap a bunch of cowboys for slave labor, and of course they knew what cowboys did.
Yeah.
And they took over the planet and took in the aliens as slaves or subjugated people.
Yeah.
So that was a good social kind of story that they did. One of my favorites, even though it's again has a TOS-y kind of vibe, is Chosen Realm. Remember though, but it's actually a very good one about, a good one for the period of the Iraq War. There were these two people who were fighting over religion.
Oh yes.
They were trying to take over the Enterprise. And
that kind of reminded me of Let That Be Your Last.
Right, exactly. It reminded me of Beale and Loci.
Yeah.
Because the idea they take them back to their home world has all been destroyed because of the war.
Yeah.
But again, instead of using racism, it's using the issue of holy wars.
That's right, religion.
Which you're facing at that time with Bin Laden and everything. So it that felt very Star Trek-y.
Yeah, it did.
And these are just episodes, like if Enterprise had done more of these, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They
did make some that were, in season 3 that did feel like a TOS or kind of Star Trek style thing. But it just seemed like they couldn't stay on track with that. They kept, deviating from that with all these other weird stories and that just, weren't that interesting, But, yeah, they should have done that more.
So, again, another one I enjoyed is an episode called Well, it's kind of a prelude to an idea in season 4 called Home. It's after the whole Stormfront thing with the Nazis. They come back, and the Xindi attack has happened, and Enterprise have come back kind of heroes, but they're upset because they're afraid of aliens coming to Earth.
Yeah, people are all... Yeah.
Right, and of course that's with Phlox's big face. But the thing with that episode is that it paralleled the Islamophobia at that time in America.
Yeah, it felt like, that's probably exactly what humans would do with that, in
Right.
situation.
And my impression was that now it's feeling Star Trek-y.
Yeah.
Now it's getting interesting here. So I was kind of getting more into Enterprise around then when that came on. Then we had kind of the Augment trilogy, but there was some playing fast and loose with canon there that just didn't really do much for me.
Yeah, that was too long. What was that? 3 parts they dragged that out for?
Yeah, that could have been a 1 episode thing, really.
I mean, it was nice seeing Brent Spiner back in there, but I was like, did they really have to put his, another Soong character in there? It's like
they're trying to bring next generation kind of stuff into it.
It was obviously almost pandering to older fans, Star Trek, just to get them to watch because the show was suffering. Ratings.
And then there was the Vulcan trilogy. Again, more shady Vulcans next.
Yeah.
That was like Shady Vulcans, the miniseries. Then they had an episode I really like in season 4 called Daedalus, and this dealt with Bill Cobb playing the guy who invented the transporter. And I don't know if you remember. I think it was another one of those Hoshi Must Suffer episodes where she basically got phased by a transporter.
Yeah, that's right.
Or something, or in some parallel reality. And they told her about this guy who died in a transporter accident who was haunting people.
Yep.
What was his name? Cyrus Ramsey. Remember the Cyrus Ramsey story? Yep. And then when she came back, she asked the crew about him, and she said, "Who's Cyrus Ramsey?" She invented this whole thing in her head.
Yeah.
So it's really an odd thing. But this guy comes on. I'm trying to think of the guy's name in Daedalus. Emery Erickson, and basically he's trying to invent this new transporter.
Yeah.
What he's really looking for is his son who died in the transporter test. That's kind of an interesting story, showing how the transporter was invented, how there was tragedy connected to it, and there was a human story, and how people distrusted, like Bones was about distrusting himself being taken apart.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they weren't in Bones' time telling campfire stories about Emery Erickson and his son getting lost.
Yeah.
And that didn't affect Bones. I'm just wondering if that's how they kind of dealt with that, because it kind of dealt with how someone might have a transporter issue. So, of course, it was a little weird to have a mirror universe thing. They did have a mirror universe. Well,
it was nice seeing what happened to the Defiant.
Right. Which, by the way, that pretty much proves that Enterprise existed in the canon universe. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we found out it ended up in the mirror universe. I guess it's only an interface.
And they built all those old the bridge and everything. They got the sets, and then the crew was running around with the TOS uniforms. I mean, that was all.
And they were using the little toy phasers. I don't know if you remember the toy phasers from. It was the ones that is really good ones. What was it?
Art Asylum, I think was
Art Asylum. Yeah, and they were so good looking, nobody ever noticed.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
the Art Asylum phasers that were new at the time.
Why go and waste time making them? Just buy them off the shelf and use them. It's like.
I mean, the Playmates one you could obviously tell was kind of a toy, but the Art Asylum was so good.
Yeah.
TOS looking phasers, and Scott Bakula looked really nice in that green kind of Kirky outfit.
I mean, they all did really. When they all put the TOS uniforms on. I mean, I don't know why they would want to do that. I mean, because it's like, well, here's some clothes. Let's try it on. It's like, they all got this sense of vanity that
I mean, and we kind of figured that they kind of stole the Constitution class idea from the regular universe.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, did they steal the NX-01 idea from the universe the same way?
Who knows?
Or either that, or did they just get technology faster because Zephram Cochrane raided the Vulcan ship?
Yeah, maybe that's
what they. It's like, oh, take it when you can,
they kind of made the assumption that humans were just a bunch of bandits, from the beginning. They just steal everything and then just.
Well, you get the impression that World War III really wasn't a big deal in that universe. That they've been at war consistently for like hundreds of years.
Yeah,
because when you saw that theme song, it was like the whole Terran Empire theme. Remember they changed the theme song for that one.
Yeah, I know. They went all the way. They just changed the whole opening. At least that was the time you didn't have to hit the remote.
Right, because they had a new theme song, which actually wasn't a bad one for the Mirror Universe.
Yeah.
Because it basically showed that, the Mirror Universe, they were always warring and killing each other, and the wars never stopped. And
it'd be like, that's what Star Trek would be if we was watching it in the Mirror Universe. It would be like that.
It would be the Mirror Universe, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so yeah, that was kind of interesting.
It was a nice nod to TOS,
Right, that was interesting, but like I said, I don't really consider that part of Enterprise. It was kind of a alternate reality, so.
And it was the Doctor that created the first agonizing booth.
Yeah, they have Flock creating the agonizer booth, yeah. So then we get into two episodes that I find really interesting, and that's Demons and Terra Prime.
Yeah.
Because, to be honest with you, that episode is a little weird because it basically anticipates essentially what in our world is a creation of the alt-right.
Yeah.
Because we have this group was stolen to Paul and Chip's DNA and made this Vulcan child.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is they're telling people, do you want mongrel Vulcan humans around? And they build this ship to go to Mars to try to mess things up. So it's just an interesting thing about how some humans are still kind of having those same prejudices over aliens.
I thought it was weird that they would have a building set up on the moon that could fly through space at warp. It's like, why would they equip such a thing like that?
Yeah, that was a little odd. It was like a circular kind of thing.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. It was just supposed to be something that was stationary, to sit on the moon. But then now we find out, it's got engines and it can go to warp for like a few seconds, and it's like, what the hell would they build all this stuff in this thing for? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of an odd thing that it.
Yeah, and then they made that laser. It was like a Death Star laser that can fire from Mars all the way to Earth. It's like,
yeah, they just this really high technology, high powered.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
That was
so. I'm not even going to mention the finale of Enterprise. I think we put that on our little booty prize list.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was going to end. I heard it might, and then they ended it in the oddest possible way.
Yeah, they did.
They brought back a somewhat advanced Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis, and then rolled them back to the last season of TNG.
Yeah.
And that was gray hairs.
Yeah, and it's like, why did they choose that part of their life, to...
But they could have talked about it like after Nemesis. Maybe have Riker on the Titan.
On the Titan, yeah.
And had that be a Titan story. It would have made more sense in that era.
Maybe it was just the idea that they wanted to close the episode with the three Enterprises, having the end, you know what I'm saying? Maybe that's the reason why they felt that they
to be honest, they could have made it even better. They could have had a holodeck being tested on maybe an Excelsior class or something, and had the NX-01 program be used to test it out.
Yeah.
It was just a weird ending to have to. It made you wonder: was Enterprise a holodeck program?
Yeah, like the whole series, was it just somebody? Because you remember the chef was always somebody mysterious. We never actually got to see his face.
No, it's Riker. He's the chef,
Yeah, and then at the end we find out, the chef was always Riker. It was always him playing around on the holodeck.
Yeah, it's like, what are we supposed to believe? The real Captain Archer was like 4 feet tall and an overbite. I mean, what?
So maybe none of that stuff was actually, and maybe that was the way they were trying to explain to the fans why everything seemed off canon and stuff like that.
And now we're getting back to Enterprise with this again.
Yeah.
See how this weird little parallel with where Star Trek is now? They're going to explain a certain thing.
Yeah.
Back to that. It's like people were upset about the Enterprise canon being all back asswards.
Yeah.
They didn't like the idea of it, and then they had to kind of scramble to I don't remember them saying it's all going to fit in the end or anything like certain people do, but they were trying to say, well, it's supposed to fit, but we'll show you how. So in the end, it's like, see, they're on the Next Generation talking about it. So yeah, it fits. Bye.
Yeah. It's like just a rush job.
And then nobody really cared. I mean, I don't think there were people who wanted to have Enterprise brought back. In fact, there was a model, I don't know if you remembered it, where the Enterprise had like a TOS secondary hull.
Yeah. They were like a refit Enterprise NX-01.
But instead, what they did is they ended at the Terra Prime thing, and then in the holodeck program, they flash forwarded 10 years after that.
Yeah.
5 years after that, kind of like.
I don't know why they did that. I mean, you know.
Yeah, the characters all looked exactly the same. It was almost like, so these characters all maintain the same position, the same appearance. And that whole thing with Trip and T'Pol.
Yeah, because it was the episode before that kind of ended on a sour note. And then, like you said, the next one was the last one. It was 10 years later. It's like,
right, and they were like, "Oh, well, you remember that relationship we had 5 years ago?" I was like, well, "Geez, that's kind of weird."
Yeah, that's over.
I would have rather presented T'Pol and Trip as a married couple with a child or something.
Yeah, they never did nothing with that. They just ended it, you know.
I mean, at least they could have spray painted a little skunk in Archer's head to show he'd aged a little bit.
Yeah, but I guess they couldn't do anything because they wanted it to be Sarek and Amanda to be the first Vulcan human bonding or something. I don't know.
Well, and nobody said they were the first.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that was the impression I got that was.
Nobody ever said Spock was the first half human, half Vulcan.
Yeah.
So, because Kirk just said it's terrible having bad blood like that, kind of sarcastic. He never said, "Oh, you were the first Vulcan human hybrid," you know.
Yeah.
He never said that, so who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, they could have shown it that way, but you know, instead they went into the Vulcans and humans are not genetically compatible, and it'll be hard to whatever. So again, my consensus with Enterprise is the episodes that really succeeded were the standalone ones.
You know, if I was to pick and choose the episodes out of Enterprise to make sort of like a prequel show, you know, TOS, I would have picked out a lot of the ones we talked about, but I'd leave all the time travel ones pretty much out of it.
Right, exactly. I might keep the Stormfront in, but I would have moved that to the end of season 1. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, had that be the end of the Daniels thing, and then it'll be the end of time travel. And then seasons 2, 3, 4, and onward being Federation building.
And on the Xindi thing, I would have erased that.
I wouldn't have even done that.
Yeah, that.
What I would have had is an attack on Earth, yes, but by the Romulans.
Yeah, the Romulans.
And that would have given them motivation to really dislike these people, you know?
Yeah, that could have been the beginning of the Romulans.
And we know the Romulans and humans were still not trusting each other, but what would be the motivation? Just they attacked each other in space and there was a war, or if the Romulans did something really serious to Earth?
That's right.
So if they did that, it would make sense. Let's go out and fight the Romulans and have it be the Romulan War season, and then have the Enterprise be on the front line of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, have it build into TOS, maybe start to see some advanced starships.
Yeah.
Like, you know, maybe see the NX-01 out there, and then maybe see this baby come out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's the new thing. They got this new Warp 6 ship or whatever, you know? I mean, just see the Federation really, like, start to come together.
Yeah.
You know, I would love to see that. Boy, it's almost like the Enterprise I want to see never existed.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess that's the whole thing. You know, it's something I'm rewriting a whole new story in my head. I would love to have seen, you know, oh, there's the connection to the show we know, you know? But instead, it's like they just went on this weird tangent with it. So, would it be fair to say that the best way to describe Enterprise would be a Star Trek of many, many lost possibilities?
Oh, yeah, very much, yeah.
Things that should have been done, could have been done, would have been interesting, but they just didn't do them. Yeah.
And I don't know if it was a lack of them not listening to the fans, or if it was just that they rushed it so fast that, you know, they just, you know, they didn't have any focus. It seemed like the focus shifted a lot, you know, and they didn't really know where to go with it.
That was very unfortunate.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you wanted to say about Enterprise at this point?
Well, like I said, it's a show that you can embrace in one way and kind of reject in another. You know what I'm saying? It's a very mixed bag. But like you said before, it's kind of like the beginning of how Trek started to just detach itself away from what it was, you know, to try to become something where they cast out a wider net for an audience, you know, to appease everybody. And by doing that, you lose the core of the whole premise of what Star Trek is when you do stuff like that. And I think it began kind of like with that, you know. So
I guess that's the end with Enterprise.
Yeah.
It's been a long road since then, and I'm not going to sing that song. Never mind copyright. I just don't even like it.
Yeah.
I mean, you told me yourself they were playing it on the radio and you didn't know what it was, and then
Yeah, until I heard it on the friggin'
you heard it on
show,
Enterprise, like, oh, this is where they're gonna go with this.
you gotta be kidding me. They're using that as the theme song.
They were using a lot of pop songs in the advertisements. Like they had, I'm trying to think of who wrote it. That I'm going away with you. They were using that song in the previews too. It's like they wanted it to have this teeny bopper association.
Yeah.
And it isn't a teeny bopper show, but it's like this is going to be a series about a bunch of 19-year-olds out in space. I mean, is that what it's going to be?
It does not fit at all with that series. It does not belong
Like
there.
I said, the theme song itself is the actual theme song that the actual visuals of the theme is not bad. They just should have picked a better theme song.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you might as well have played "Follow the Yellow Brick Road." I mean, that would have made just about as much sense as the song that they picked to put on there. I mean, it just doesn't belong.
I mean, they could have put that Star Trek 4 theme. Can you imagine that? The little bells and like it wouldn't really go with that either. So
they're trying to make a mockery of the Star Trek show. I mean, they just
I just got the impression that was for the kids. Like they're figuring that the high schoolers or the college kids are going to say, "Oh, this Star Trek series is speaking to us with this thing,"
Yeah.
But Star Trek people, they like it a certain way. They want it to have this science fiction magisterial sense. They don't want some. I mean, even for a pop song, it wasn't even that great.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a silly cliche.
I mean, like you told me, they couldn't get any singers to sing it, so the guy that wrote it had to sing it himself.
Well, it's funny. I'd heard that he was thinking of either Rod Stewart or Bryan Adams to sing it, but Russell Warren couldn't get that, so he said, "Okay, I'll just sing it myself," sounding like them, but
yeah,
and again, it just came off as like, okay, so you just inserted every single cliche of a pop song in that era into one and made it a Star Trek theme. Star Trek deserves a little better. And what also got me is they took Star Trek off the name. I just found that ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't want this to be Star Trek. Star Trek is not for,
Yeah.
The disassociation was difficult.
Yeah, it's like I said, the effort right there was already starting to try to detach Star Trek from itself. I mean, to make it a show for everybody, not just Star Trek fans. And that's when it started to lose its way.
It's very simple. If you don't want to watch Star Trek, don't watch Star Trek. There's many, many other shows.
Yep.
Many of equal to good quality, but you don't have to watch Star Trek, but let it be what it is.
Yeah.
So I guess that in a way, especially since this unfortunate Via conflict, which they're trying to fix now, happened after Enterprise. Enterprise is basically, even though it had its good moments, and I do want to go back and revisit more of it, because I always feel like I skimmed around a lot of it in its day, was a lesson in terms of marketing in Star Trek and how to do everything wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't pursue it. I don't even remember it being promoted all that well.
That's true, yeah.
I think about a year and a half for Art Asylum to get anything out as far as merchandise. They had an NX-01, they had a phase pistol, they had a communicator they put together, and figures where some of them had bridge parts you were supposed to put together, but then they just stopped doing that. So it was a merchandising kind of flop.
Yeah. When they saw the show wasn't really hitting the ratings where it should be, they all stopped the merchandising right off.
Kind of sad in a way.
Yeah.
It just kind of bought Star Trek to the state it is in now. Yet Enterprise is the last of the classic canon Star Trek that's out there, and it's the place where it all started to come apart.
Yeah. So there's fans out there that really, to this day, still don't want to include Enterprise as part of canon. And I can't blame them. I mean, because like you said, there were moments in there that you just say, that shouldn't have been there, but they had some good episodes too. So you don't want to kind of exclude all of it. It's just
right, and it did. And when the episodes were good, it did have a definite Star Trek flavor.
Yeah.
Unlike some things, but it did. I will say when I saw the good episodes, they did feel Star Trek-y to me.
Yeah.
Of course, I was just off Voyager, off DS9, so I was all charged up and we had the Nemesis and Insurrection, so I was still kind of feeling it,
Yeah.
Of course, even though it wasn't the best of the movies, when I heard they were putting Nemesis out, I'm like, okay, so now we're gonna have a little bit of our Star Trek back again, and it wasn't exactly, but still, there was still kind of an interest in it. And then after Enterprise, it was like it all fell apart, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't really the actor's fault. I mean, all the people that they chose to play the parts they were very, very good at what they did. They were just handed stuff that really didn't work for stories.
You can only make so much lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
Or, to use a vulgarity or a colorful metaphor, you can only make so much lemonade out of lemons. Or, you know, to use a vulgarity or a colorful metaphor, you can only make so much lemonade out of lemons. Or, you know, to use a vulgarity or a colorful metaphor, you can only make so much lemonade out of lemons. Or, you know, to use a vulgarity or a colorful metaphor, I mean, if you heard the extension of the lemonade phrase, if somebody hands you a big turd, make chocolate milk. You know, that's basically what Enterprise was being forced to do, and it's hard to make chocolate milk when you don't have chocolate.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just
I mean, I feel bad when I think about, you know, the actors themselves. I think there was a lot of high hopes that maybe they would be part of, they could conclude themselves as part of the Star Trek ensemble, but you know, they don't really show up at conventions that much, and I think maybe it's because they feel the fans kind of reject.
I mean, they were when the series was on.
Yeah.
But like I said, when it was off, I mean, I don't see Scott Bakula or Jolene Blaylock going to the conventions very much.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's part of the reason is that the fans just didn't like the show, and they probably felt they were the cause of it, and it wasn't the acting at all. It had nothing to do with that. Everybody that was acting in the show did a great job. You know, it's just the stories were tough, you know, for the fans to swallow.
Not even. I was thinking they weren't even.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing with Enterprise is that basically shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't. At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, next week is episode 50. And where we go, nobody knows. Until then, live long and prosper.